Hey guys, thanks for joining us. I'm executive producer Jordan M. Sloane, and I appreciate you joining us today. Too Complicated for History is the first entertainment property from Los Angeles and Philadelphia-based Primary Source Media. Primary Source Media makes podcasts, television shows, digital content, and films about U.S. history. Too Complicated for History is a new history podcast from Primary Source Media that examines the deleted scenes of American history. Too Complicated for History delves into little known topics that never make it into the school textbooks or the public discourse. We're incredibly excited to be partnering with Odyssey on this podcast. I'd like to welcome my guest today, producer and co-host and expert historian, Dr. Lynn Price Robbins, and our producer, Patrick Long. Guys, welcome.
Hey, Jordan, thanks.
Excited to finally be on the show.
Yeah, me too. I really appreciate you guys joining me. I have some questions. I really want to talk to you guys about the making of this show, some of the deeper thoughts, as well as introduce our audience to really who we are as producers, who we are, off camera, so to speak, off mic. So I'm just going to break the ice here a little bit. And I know everyone hates this question. I'm going to start with one that we didn't even have prepared because I just want to get us off book here a little bit. Favorite color. All right. Now, Isaac likes to say he hates that question because he's not 5 years old.
That's actually my answer.
Oh.
Isaac I think he likes orange or green.
Well, my favorite color is green. I'm wearing it. The walls are painted green. Favorite color, yes, green.
All right. But do you have a favorite color? Come on.
No, I don't have a favorite color. I am partial towards green, but I don't actively seek
I'm sorry. I'm going to be honest with you. Lynn already took that answer, so we're going to have to get you guessing again.
I'll go with a nice mauve. Is that an acceptable? Or a fuchsia?
Fuchsia.
Mauve was my wedding color, so I absolutely accept that. And that is the only reason I know what that is. Nice. All right. Excellent. Thanks for breaking the ice here with me. I want to get involved in our questions. So, guys, how did this podcast get started? Just take me back to the beginning.
Back to the beginning. I was born on a cold Sunday morning. So it started with Revolutionary, our 8-part documentary on George Washington. And if you don't know a historian personally, we like to talk. We like to talk a lot, and we like to talk about things that normal people, as in non-historians, probably wouldn't be as interested in. And so Isaac also likes to talk. Isaac is a non-historian talker. I'm a historian talker. And as I was prepping him for writing the Revolutionary docuseries, he would learn something new, and then he would have 50 questions about it. And then a half an hour Zoom would end up as a 3-hour Zoom. And we would cover every topic under the sun that had nothing to do with anything. And eventually we just said, hey, these conversations might be interesting to a few people. Maybe we should do something with them. And the idea of a podcast was born.
And that leads to the cold, dark Sunday that I was born. I was actually brought on by Isaac once the docuseries was rolling, another property by Primary Source Media that will be coming out in the future. So stay tuned for that. Also, Isaac is not joining us today because he is on paternity leave. And he is helping his wife, Mia, and their new baby, Ronan.
Yeah, shout out to Ronan. In fact,
shout out to Ronan Loftus.
Welcome to the world.
This episode dedicated to Ronan Loftus.
Yeah, absolutely. So Isaac called me and essentially told me what Lynn just said. He's like, hey, we are having incredible conversations. I'm working on this docuseries, and I would love to develop a podcast and a show around these conversations. And actually, the way it originally started was I was coming on to do a companion piece to the docuseries. And then we we realized that that couldn't be so expansive. It couldn't be on topics that weren't around George Washington, but we were having conversations with historians that, I mean, like Lynn said, it covers everything. Um, and they were very long conversations. And, you know, part of what was happening was we were writing the outlines for the show, and I was just an active listener in the background. And then the questions and tangents that I was thinking about, or the questions and tangents that we were actively discussing while we were doing the outlining, instead of outlining, started to create this massive list of topics. And we have Lynn and all of the historians that we've worked with, and they all, if she doesn't know someone, then they know someone who knows something about what we want to talk about. And we decided, like, these are the stories we want to tell because it's just so exciting. They're so different. They're not what you're going to hear. And, you know, it's just fresh, new, and fun stuff.
Yeah, history is fun, Jordan.
I've actually learned that through all of you. I completely agree. You know, in my introduction, I said that this show is about the deleted scenes of history. You know, as a filmmaker myself, that resonates with me. I really like that. What does that mean to you guys when you say the deleted scenes of history? Tell our audience a little bit about what that implies, what that entails.
Do you want to take that as a non-historian, Pat?
Sure. So as the least non-expert, since Isaac is also our non-expert, but he might as well be a historian. He's an encyclopedia brain.
Yeah, at this point.
You'll all get to know him in subsequent episodes. The deleted scenes are the stories that change. I mean, I the best way I can equate it to is, you know, when you have your DVD, which or Blu-ray, you know, I guess I'm dating myself by saying DVD.
My VHS tape.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they had VHS deleted scenes. That was a whole separate VHS that you'd have to buy on the side, you know. That's so funny. It's the stories we're not hearing. It's the in-between moments, right? It's things that are important to the story, have add context, but frankly don't necessarily need to be there for the story to be complete. And I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment that the story isn't complete without those moments. However, there is a limit to the details and the amount of information that you can give people in one sitting. You know, as a storyteller, there's a reason we cut scenes from films and projects. And it's sometimes the story can be told despite our love for all of the scenes. And so this is kind of, as someone that likes history, this is kind of a vanity filmmaker project because I get to just tell those stories that don't get told.
And Lynn, adding those deleted scenes back in, albeit in this separate podcast, what does that do for the history that you thought you knew?
That's a great question because it really just makes it a more well-rounded story. So I like to use the example of somebody who sees a fender bender, and there's somebody on, you know, let's say it's a four-way stop sign, and there's someone at each of the intersections, and you ask each of them what happened. You're going to get a different story from all of them. And then you ask the driver, and, you know, the driver of the one, you know, the one car, the driver of the other car. And then you add in, well, was it raining? What day was it? Were they listening to the radio? Were they on their cell phone? Were they texting? And then they tell their friends about it. And then their friends tell someone. And in order to really understand what happens, none of those one stories can be considered the truth. It's a perspective, but there really is no one truth that I could say step by step, here's what happened, and that is the truth. And so the more perspectives that you bring in, the more well-rounded story you get. You're not just focusing on one perspective, one individual, but you're trying to find out what everyone saw, what everyone experienced, and then put that together, and from there try to tell the story.
Well, and I can say, as the executive producer of this and the producer of the docu-series that we're doing, part of the reason why the parent company is called Primary Source Media is that in telling those perspectives, we try to be, it is our North Star to be as accurate as possible, utilizing primary sources to tell that story. So I appreciate that. What that leads me to is asking both of you, from each of your individual perspectives, how this show, Too Complicated for History, got its name. Why don't we start with you, Pat, since we just heard from Lynn, and then we'll go to Lynn.
So I'm going to have Isaac tell this story because he does a better job of it than me. But it was a really cool moment in that we were having a conversation with the president of Mount Vernon, Doug Bradburn, and Isaac and Doug were talking about Aung San Suu Kyi. And please forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. She's a politician from Burma, and what I remember is her presence early in life. She actually won a Nobel Peace Prize. I believe she was similar to Nelson Mandela to the people of Burma, in that she was a political prisoner for a really long time because she wanted democracy, freedom. She wanted to change the government for the better of the people. And then later in life, she supported the army, if I'm not mistaken, and became somewhat of a genocide apologist for something that the Burma military was doing, and it was very different, right, than what she was known for, and literally receiving a Nobel Peace Prize for. And so their discussion was how the history books will either paint her as the political prisoner and the Nobel Peace Prize winning person, or as the genocide apologist. And it's because that story is too complicated for history. And I remember Isaac said that, and we had been trying to figure out a name for our show. And I was like, dude, that's it. That is the title of our show. And we loved it. And we went from there, and it's led us to it. Also, what was really exciting about that moment was it helped shape what conversations we were going to be having, because we were everywhere. And so that's why it led to our first show being about the creation of an American identity, because that question is too complicated for history, right? Like, and I hate to plug the name so many times or be hacky in repeating that too many times, but it is a question that doesn't have a definable answer, and that's stuff we love exploring. And and that's how the show got its name.
It's a fascinating story, and one also about identity too. So that's great. Lynn, what is tell me your perspective on the formation of the name.
When they came up with the name, we were filming interviews, and I was in the non-green green room. I think I was in the back having a snack, and Isaac and Pat came running in and said, we came up with a title. And then they told me the story, and I got very excited because it sort of perfectly represented what I had been thinking, but didn't have the creative wherewithal at the moment to come up with myself. Because the beauty of history is that it is the study of human beings, and we are flawed, and we are not one thing. And so we can very much, we can't be defined by one or even two descriptors. So you can be in, George Washington. So was he an enslaver? Yes. Do we throw him out, with the baby with the bathwater because he was an enslaver? He was also the first president. So how are we going to justify those two things? And it's not even justifying, it's just acknowledging both of those things. And the thing with history is it's not like math or science in that there are answers. I mean, a math problem has an answer. A chemistry equation has a correct answer. History does not. History has many perspectives, many ideas. Sure, a date. There are some, hard and fast numbers. There are dates, but there is no one answer in history. it's just constantly changing and evolving. And I think that what we're doing is represented even in that title, that it's just too complicated for a history class or a history textbook. It's, it goes beyond the study of history that we here in the US tend to receive from our secondary education.
Yeah, can you imagine the size of that textbook? If we had every perspective, do kids even have textbooks anymore, or are they just PDFs?
It's all online.
Yeah.
What's a PDF? Yeah, it's all online.
What's interesting is really what it is it's a study of people, right? And people are complicated, and history made up of people told by people is bound to be even more complicated.
Exactly.
It's really exciting. I love it. I'm a listener too. So I want to know what excites you about it, Lynn. What gets you so excited to do this? Because we put a lot of time into this, and there's a lot more episodes to come. And every day you're showing up super excited. We all are. I want to know what excites you.
I get to talk about history, and whether or not the other people are pretending or not, they get to act like they're interested in the same history, and we get to have conversations. And I'm just a huge history nerd, and I will talk about history to anyone who would like to those who would not like to, but perhaps aren't willing to say so. I just like to talk about history, and I'll do it anywhere and anytime. So the fact that I get to talk about history to people who are actually listening and are actively talking about it themselves just makes me very happy.
Let's debunk that word nerd a little bit, right? It has a negative connotation sometimes, but I
wear it proudly.
We're taking it back.
Yeah.
I think we're reclaiming that word, nerd.
Yeah, I wear the badge proudly. I have no problem with it.
I love that. Pat, what gets you so excited?
So as someone that has been in the film industry, just a little insight into me. I wanted to originally, coming out of high school, be a history teacher. All of my history teachers had a profound impact on me as in high school and in college. And I loved it. And then I found film, and it was like, well, history can come later. And so this is kind of the joining of those two forces for me, and the two things that I've really enjoyed. But not only that, they're good stories, right? And so as a storyteller, I'm actively just learning new stories. The amount of times we've gone down a tangent, and it's like we couldn't even put that in a movie or a show because no one would believe that something like that happened, or the timing of this worked out as such, or that you can't write these things. They're incredible stories, and it's everything from learning what made someone who I view as literally the face on a monument, seeing them take notes on like what they needed for food for the day, which is fascinating and kind of, boring details, but it changes the perspective of who they are, to the craziness that leads to, the US winning the American Revolution, or any other story, right? It doesn't have to be military or otherwise. It's just, these things are so fascinating. And so as a storyteller, it's funny, there's almost no better story than what's in history. And
fact is stranger than fiction, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as we keep going with this show, it's just been so fun to learn so many little nuggets, if I may, in history. Yeah, it's super cool.
And Jordan, if I can just share my favorite moment perhaps ever was when, and just so everyone knows, Jordan worked on the Marvel films, all these big movies, superheroes. And the day you said to me, why do we make things up when the truth of history is so interesting? I just felt like all of my, my life goals had been accomplished, and that I could just slide away into the sunset knowing that I made a difference, because that made me so happy to hear someone who makes films, who was in Hollywood, and these big budget Marvel film said, you know what? History is actually really interesting. Why are we making crap up? That just made me very happy. So I wanted to share that.
That's
That
the
is
first
great. I
time.
do want to just add. I love making crap up, so that's also a fun part of storytelling. That is an art and craft of itself. So
Well,
yeah,
that's the first time that I heard that from you, Lynn, and I remember that moment very differently. I thought that was a profoundly stupid thought that I had, and I'm so glad that it actually was the impetus for your level
Well,
of
think about
excitement.
how many movies that are based on history. They'll just go off on a tangent and make something up, completely irrelevant to the true story when something even more interesting really did happen. And I think that's what you were seeing is why aren't we accurate? Because that's actually more interesting than what Hollywood's coming up with for these historical fiction movies. And that just made my heart sing.
It is so true, and I still believe it to this day. But with so many stories, so many nuggets, as Pat said, and so many interesting perspectives, as you've said, Lynn. How do we choose topics? I mean, there's bound to be an endless amount of topics out there. How do we, as a show, choose which ones we want to bring to our audience, to our listeners? How about we start with you, Lynn?
Okay. Well, there's the practical way, which is I look at all my historian friends and see what they're doing and say, oh, that would be awesome, and ask them to come on. So I have a lot of historian friends who are doing amazing research. And so I like to share what they've been doing because I know that people will be really interested. But another thing we're trying to do, so for our first episode, we talk with Lindsay Travinsky about what makes an American or what is an American, is we're also looking at what's going on in America today and how history can inform who we are today and where we're going as a nation. So we're not trying to be, political. We're not talking about necessarily what's going on in the world today, but we're trying to inform citizens about their history so that they can make more informed decisions today and also have a greater sense of who they are and where they come from. So, if you want to say we have a big goal, it's, to make more well informed citizens who, know where they're coming from. And because of that, have a better idea of where they want to go.
I love that, Pat.
yeah. I mean, context of where you are is everything. To kind of follow and echo Lynn's sentiments. And also, one of the other ways we choose is just taking a lot of notes. And when we're having these conversations, being like, oh, that's interesting. Boop, boop, boop. There are a lot of scribbles and a lot of things that get burned later. And we have a funny bit on that actually might be a deleted scene of our deleted scenes of history show. So we might have to release that. There's a moment in Seinfeld we discussed that's pretty funny. Yeah, but yeah, it's that. And then also, one of the things we're doing is trying to support publishers, right? And so
Mhm.
we're looking at, quarterly catalogs and what's new and exciting that's being released. What are the historians now talking about, even the ones we don't know?
Mhm.
And it's led us to a few really cool interviews and a couple of really interesting people. And so, it's an endless journey. There is an infinite amount of content we could talk about, and that's only related to U.S. history. And we
Mhm.
will, I think we'll probably expand at some point into some global stuff. But for now, we're just deep diving and learning everything we can when we can, and we just enjoy having these conversations so much that we want to share them with the rest of the world.
And I've really enjoyed having these conversations with you guys. Lynn, Pat, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Too Complicated for History's first episode with Dr. Lindsay Travinsky is live right now wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining us. Take care.